Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for attending this Next Generation Leadership Collective Manifesto launch. And it's wonderful to see everyone who has joined us. We are very excited to share with all of you this document that arose from a series of conversations we've had from a group of women who are working in public health, food policy, food systems, and nutrition. My name is Rebecca Namara, and I've been part of the Next Generation Leadership Collective task team since November 2020. And I've also been involved in organizing the Changemaker Connect forums, which many of you have been a part of. And those started in 2021, and in writing this Manifesto for Leadership. In the next hour, we're going to hear from women from across the globe on our experiences and commitment to transforming how we lead and who leads. We'll also have a keynote from Dr. Jemima Njuki, who is the head of the Economic Empowerment at UN Women. I encourage you all to post and share about this event using the hashtags that Shuwen will put in the chat box. To begin, we're going to have a few members of the Next Generation Leadership Task Team, and they will introduce themselves and also provide some background around this Manifesto for Leadership. And I'm sure and hope that all of you will enjoy this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carmen Torres Ledesma. I am originally from Uruguay, but I am based in Costa Rica in Central America. I work at UNEP as a sustainable food systems expert, and I am a member of the Next Generation Leadership Collective task team. The task team formed in 2020 after COVID hit, and we were having discussions around the impacts on food and nutrition systems. We realized that solutions to poor quality diets and inequitable, unsustainable food systems actually exist. But what is missing is the leadership needed to put these solutions to work. Accelerating progress towards a well-nourished world is going to take courageous leadership, capable of navigating complex systemic challenges. It will mean, in particular, unleashing the power of women to redefine leadership and reimagine new systems. Thank you.
Hi, I am Shuwen Ng. I'm Associate Professor of Public Health Nutrition at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, United States, and I'm originally from Singapore. It's been a real ride these past 2 years since Corinna and I first discussed our own experiences around mentoring and leadership in the area of food and nutrition systems. Indeed, the Next Generation Leadership Collective was established because we believe affecting real change towards a world where everybody eats well, underpinned by food systems that regenerate the planet and support equitable livelihoods, will make transformation in who leads and how they lead. Our purpose is therefore to create a leadership movement towards a well-nourished world. Our vision is courageous leadership practices in action at all levels for more impactful decision-making in nutrition and food systems.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Backola from Wadawurrung Country in regional Victoria in Australia, and pleased to say that I'm also one of the task team members. Through discussions we held in 2021, the Next Generation Leadership Collective came to a shared vision of what leadership needs to look like to rise to the complex challenges of achieving a well-nourished world. And so we identified leadership practices, and these are the things that we can actually do in our everyday leadership at whatever level we are, needed to push systemic and sustainable change. And we identified too the differences we believe they can make, and the practices drawn from existing evidence and our own experiences of leadership grounded in our daily work and lives. They reflect existing understandings of the leadership needed to change complex systems, and all eight leadership practices that you'll hear about today are interconnected and all equally important.
Hi everyone, my name is Ana Clara Duran. I'm also part of the task team that was involved in the discussions and ultimately in the writing of the manifesto we're launching today. I'm from Brazil. I'm currently based in São Paulo, and I'm an assistant research professor at the University of Campinas, which a lot of people know as Unicamp. and a research fellow at NUPENS, which is the Center for Immunological Studies in Nutrition and Health at the University of São Paulo. Well, following on Catherine's words, we call on everyone who works in nutrition and food systems to integrate the 8 courageous leadership practices into the way you work as best you can, from whatever level you lead, whether as an individual, community, company, or institution. You're likely practicing some already, actually. Others might be a lot harder, I will say. Work out how this applies to what applies in your context, career stage, and sector. For those of you with the power to do so, enable and reward those practices carried out by others.
Next, we will hear from 2 women on why we believe these leadership practices are needed. Thanks for your patience as we get these videos uploaded. And Rebecca. First, we'll hear from Maisha.
My name is Maisha Hutton, and I'm the Executive Director of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, an alliance of over 60 civil society organizations across the 20 countries of the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM. We are united around a central goal of tackling obesity and NCDs. I'm really honored to have been asked to share personal experience demonstrating how elements of the manifesto have been reflected in my personal leadership. So when thinking about the courageous leadership practices, I felt that HCC's recent advocacy for front-of-package nutrition warning labels in the Caribbean really provided a good example of how the application of these types of practices has strengthened my own leadership. Last year, HCC was one of the key drivers of a regional movement, a groundswell, if you will, of diverse actors from varied backgrounds uniting around the promotion of healthier food environments. Ultimately, the warning labels were not approved, but we were instrumental in building one of the largest public health campaigns our region has seen. We truly connected for collective action. We knew that our success was very much hinged on cultivating a strong, varied, unified public health voice to create the political space for policy support. A big part of building this coalition was tackling hierarchies, recognizing and acknowledging the value of all actors, regardless of where they sat on the totem pole, and also by creating space for new voices to be heard, by lifting them up in spaces of power, especially young people and people living with NCDs. And doing this, anchoring our campaign with these voices really helped to ground us in our social purpose. Challenging power hierarchies is particularly difficult when facing well-resourced and highly influential opposition in small settings like the Caribbean. As you can imagine, this was a David and Goliath type scenario. We had to be smart. How do we as civil society begin to confront institutionalized and cultural power imbalances? We had to ensure that the coalitions felt safe and protected to be effective. We had to revisit the goals while balancing risks. How far did we want to go? As a small, vulnerable organization, as a woman in a male-dominated space. This wasn't easy. I personally had to step back and reflect on what we wanted to achieve and at what cost. I called on colleagues, senior and junior, for advice. I had to ask myself, were we listening? Was I listening? Was our listening selective? Were we engaging with all of the actors? Were we acknowledging all perspectives? And so we made mistakes along the way, but we were persistent. We learned and we adapted our strategy. And we ultimately did this as a coalition, aligned in our purpose and our vision. As a result, we were able to convene almost 50 regional institutions, over 300 public health professionals, and contribute to 6 countries voting in favor of front-of-package labeling. We all know getting one country to vote in favor of these policies is a tough task in of itself. So, in summary, I'm really thankful for that experience, as it was a period of tremendous personal leadership growth for me. I'd like to congratulate the inspiring women at the helm of the Next Generation Leadership Collective for creating this powerful manifesto for leadership aimed at helping us move closer towards achieving a well-nourished world. Thanks.
Thank you, Maisha. Now we'll move on to hearing from an academic.
My name is Tilakavati Karupaya, Tilly for short. I am a professor at the Faculty of Health and Medical Sciences in Taylor's University, Malaysia. I think today's launch of the manifesto is so important as it recognizes some really big things that leadership needs to do if we are to collectively achieve a well-nourished world. One of those is to tackle the power hierarchies and dynamics holding back transformative ideas and innovations. This is a tough thing to do, but something I believe we can all do in our own way. When I started my career in nutrition in the early 1990s in Malaysia, this was a period of rapid globalization of the food system and harmonization of the global diet. At that time, joining professional societies seemed to be the only participative way of being or getting into the nutrition scene. These bodies were the medium to update, network, and attain peer influence. So we all zealously attended these meetings that were being sponsored generally by the newly rising food industry. Now, the merging of private food companies, civil society, and academia during this era had an incredible impact on young researchers, creating norms about what to do and how to do it, and shaping policies like the dietary guidelines. The cozy relationship between academia, civil society, and industry in Malaysia created policy inertia and crowded out space for new evidence and ideas that were coming forward about the commercial determinants of nutrition. So I decided to step out of societies despite earning the disapproval of my colleagues and seniors, and began to work with colleagues globally on research on food environments. In 2021, however, I decided to rejoin societies, realizing it was imperative to work collectively to change the dynamics of institutionalized power hierarchies which were strangling commitments to population nutrition in Malaysia. One of the things I noted was the same person has been president of this society for 27 years. I felt if we were to make change, we needed to elevate the voices and decision-making power of a broader diversity of leaders. So I worked with like-minded colleagues to get him to step down. While we did not manage to do this, in our own way, we began to disrupt mindsets and help people think differently about what it will really take to improve population nutrition in Malaysia. We know that it will take time, but it won't happen without leadership which is prepared to disrupt power hierarchies of all forms, leadership that will tap into and implement ideas from a larger collective. It's only with this type of leadership will we get a better deal for food and nutrition for our population. Thank you.
Wow, that was so wonderful to hear from Maisha and Tilly and the changes that they think need to happen given their own experiences. Well, we won't have time for Q&A. Attendees are welcome to please share your thoughts in the chat. Now we will hear from several women who have been part of our Changemakers Connect forums on how some of these leadership practices has impacted how they work with others and in decision making. Madiha, would you like to get us started, please?
Hello, I'm Madiha Ahmed with Canada's International Development Research Centre. I'm a senior program specialist in our climate resilient food system team based here in Ottawa. And I'm speaking to you from the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. I'd like to talk today about something that I and my colleagues are very proud to be working on, our research investment in the transformation of food systems, which is where we focus on the change pathway for a food system that is fit for purpose. So in other words, one that is resilient, healthy, equitable, and environmentally sustainable. And most importantly, one where equity-seeking groups set the agenda and lead the change process. But how did we get approval and funding for this work stream that centers research questions on shifting power relations? Here we applied the leadership practice of connecting with each other for collective action. Let me set the scene. I work in a bureaucracy where the risk appetite for radical approaches is very low. In 2019, pre-pandemic, I wanted to work on structural inequality. This resonated with other colleagues, but it was dismissed at senior levels and it wasn't integrated into our 10-year plan. But persistence does pay off. So applying lessons on organizing from my work with unions and DEI affinity groups, over the past 18 months, I've been working with colleagues collectively on designing this work stream on transformation, with a focus on research led by equity-seeking groups such as Indigenous communities, displaced populations, women with low incomes or precarious employment. Now, this is outside the comfort zone of our regular programming, means larger risk. It's made possible because instead of putting forward ideas as an individual, like I did previously, which then can be dismissed as they go up the chain, this was a plan championed by multiple people across the team. We use the collective to keep each other motivated, even as we received requests to revise and reword. The peer collaboration was also strategic, as by consensus, we did not push forward other ideas that would have competed for funding. And not surprisingly, this employee-led collective reflects the diversity that exists in our workforce and is different from, let's say, management structure that we have. So this is a story of the power of a collective in influencing our institutional direction for what is currently a $20 million investment, but this has room to grow, and creating a space where we can together prioritize social purpose and truly value the contribution regardless of hierarchy. And not least, this makes it easier for all of us to be brave and honest. I now hand over to Melanie.
Thanks, Madiha. My name is Melanie O'Leary, and I'm a nutrition technical specialist at World Vision Canada. I also lead a coalition for the Gender Transformative Framework for Nutrition. I would also like to talk about the leadership practice that is related to collective action, so connecting with others for collective action. So if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would not have considered myself a leader. I'm still not sure I consider myself a leader, but at that point I had been in the same organization for more than a decade. And I felt like I didn't have a voice and that it was really drowned out by competing priorities and agendas within this large organization that I still work at. But just over 2 years ago, I pulled together a meeting of female peers across similar organizations here in Canada to discuss a shared desire to see gender equality more substantially integrated into our projects, and actually to challenge the global dialogue on nutrition action to understand the interconnectedness with gender equality. And from that meeting, it really established a shared desire to promote this awareness globally and to see it translate into action, starting within our own organizations. So I was able to formalize this group into a coalition with a clear articulation of that vision. And to be very honest, the formalization of the coalition was really driven by a need to have clear parameters for intellectual property and contribution and acknowledgement. And we really felt like that was necessary to create a safe space to work collaboratively without competing with each other for, attention or resources. And so having that strong articulation of the shared objective really brought us together and kept us accountable for the actions that we were committed to take as a group, and also to really make sure that each member felt valued. So for me personally, leading the group with this central purpose gave me the freedom to not feel like I had to drive my institution's priorities forward, but rather to just focus on the coalition's mandate and to give me the space to listen. And I think as we leaned more into this movement, I think it created a space for me to listen and respect all of the participants' perspective equally. And as we saw each participant bring in a unique perspective and their own priorities, both reflected from their career experience and what their organization is focused on, we're able to leverage that to challenge our collective understanding of gendered barriers to nutrition and to really see some interesting innovations emerge. And what I saw, over the last year specifically is that working in coalition has broken down some of the competitive culture that we experience within the NGO world, particularly when we're in the same exact sector. And we actually, we were able to amplify the message beyond what a single organization could have achieved. And we started partnering on other initiatives beyond that, just because of this now collective responsibility we have. But what's actually more interesting for me as I reflect on it is that this opportunity to grow through collective leadership has helped me to find a voice to lead within my own organization as well. So having that collective voice really helped me to have the confidence to advocate for strategic investments in my organization that I didn't feel like I had the power to do before. And having the coalition behind those recommendations seemed to also give more weight in the way that those recommendations were perceived by my peers within the organization. It's certainly still a challenge to continue to advocate for those investments and prioritization, but the coalition has also been a source of support to each other as we navigate those challenges. So each time we feel we're coming up against obstacles within our organizations, we're coming back to support each other and to overcome the challenges and just really encourage each other to keep going. So for me, when I think about this manifesto, the one that strikes me the most in terms of my leadership journey has been with the collective leadership. I will turn it over to Tamron to share.
Hi, my name is Tamron Frank. I'm a researcher and a PhD student at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa, although I'm currently a visiting scholar at the University of North Carolina in the USA for the year. And today I'm going to share on my experience with leadership practice number 6, which is to reflect individually and collectively. I tend to be my own harshest critique and worst enemy, and I'm sure quite a lot of you on the call can relate with that. And because of this, self-reflection in terms of criticism comes very easily to me, but I've found that being able to reflect on my successes and strengths is much more difficult. And it often leaves me with a sense of incompetency in my job as well as my leadership abilities. And this is where being surrounded by a group of supportive female colleagues and friends who I trust has been extremely valuable. Being able to discuss and reflect on situations allows me to acknowledge the bad as well as the good. And this has really been a helpful tool for me in building up my confidence in my work and leadership abilities. And it also helps me to identify blind spots and areas where I can improve in, which I might not have been aware of if I didn't have a safe space to discuss and reflect on difficult situations. Reflecting isn't only about personal growth, but also about working collectively and how we interact or could interact differently with each other. And this encourages a much stronger, more collaborative work environment, especially in the food and nutrition space, where there are many complexities and different perspectives that need to be taken into account. Taking a step back to pause and reflect allows us the opportunity to learn from each other and understand each other's perspectives better. Making time for reflection isn't always easy, especially when we're under pressure, and it can feel like there just isn't enough time to spend on something as trivial as reflecting. However, making the time to build up trusting work relationships to create a safe space is definitely worthwhile. And to end on a personal note, my favorite place for individual self-reflection is while I'm out walking in nature. Over to you, Luciana.
Thank you very much, Tamrin. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Luciana Castronuevo, and I work at FIC Argentina. We are an NGO that works on the promotion of policies for the prevention of NCDs. And my work involves coordinating the research department, but I also involve in different advocacy projects. And then in the organization where I work, we are mostly women. And during all these years working on the promotion of food policies, I found that this situation replicates also in other parts of the world. And also during my research work, when I work with grassroots organizations, they are mostly women. So when thinking which all of these organizations have in common, I think the idea of connecting with others was the first thing that came to my mind, the same that Maria and Melanie was mentioning before. And I observed that this leadership practice when conducting, for example, interviews and observations in poor neighborhoods here in the city of Buenos Aires, where you could see that women were the ones in charge of the household food security, but they were also really political actors in their communities. They were really the ones who had the tools to communicate peoples and to also be able to connect their community with other relevant actors in the state. So when thinking why they were able to do that, I think that the ability to communicate with others was really crucial for their work. And then in another arena, when I think about my advocacy work and all the work that has been done during the last years related with the front of packaging labeling here in Argentina, last year in our country, we enacted a health food promotion law that it's really good. I mean, it includes a front of packaging labeling and also health and healthy school environments. And this was not, I mean, something that was the achievement of an organization, of a person. It was really a collective success for the region. And all the collaboration that was conducted before this law and all the networks that we were able to generate during during the research and also during the advocacy was really crucial. So I think that without the ability of connecting to each other and this ability of connecting with others really also implies the ability to really listen to others, because these other organizations, they are not identical to us. They are different, but we all share the same goal of a better nourished world. And I think that based on that, we can really build a lot. So Camila, now you can have your experience mentioned.
Thanks, Luciana. I'm Camila Corbalán. I'm a researcher at INTA in the University of Chile. I'm also the mother of Amaya and Dominga, two very nice pre-adolescent girls that since March have been arguing non-stop about the screen time that we give them. So really, this has been very, very annoying. They have been driving us crazy. So last Sunday, we decided to actually have a meeting in which all the family discussed what was going on with the screen time. So my husband and I had the opportunity of sharing all the reasons why we have decided to limit their screen time. And they also have the chance of explaining us why we were limiting their social life and a number of arguments that they put in the table for us to consider. So basically, we had to open our minds and hear what they were saying to us, and we were able to manage to find a new agreement that has been working so far. We will see for how long. But I thought I would share this very personal anecdote because I think that relationships in the food system arena are very similar to the relationship in a family. It's a very complex scenario. There are several actors with very different point of views, with different goals and different motivations. However, we want to work together. We really want to learn how to hear each other. We really wanted to create bonds and to create trust, because that's the only way in which all of us can work together. So I think that many times we get tired. We get tired of opposition. We get tired of having things difficult. And we just want to mingle with people who are like us, that view things in a similar way that we do. But I truly believe that we need to engage with people who think different to us, with people from other sectors, with people from other views. And we need to be humble and open to hear criticism criticism, to hear about other ways of addressing things, and we need to find commonalities and ways to move forward. So I basically wanted to share that I think that we need to keep listening with curiosity if we really want to transform our food systems. Next to Paula.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Camila and Luciana, and all that came before. I'm Paula Jones. I'm from Brazil. I'm a social scientist, and I'm the co-founder of an NGO that works on health promotion. We started with tobacco control, but now we work a lot on food policy issues and other risk factors for NCBs. I completely changed my script because of like two things that happened today, and I'm also inspired by the talks before me. When I read the manifesto, which I loved, I really connected with the sentence, well, speak open and authentically, as something that kind of I identify with a lot because of my personality and like how I became kind of leader, like I think it was Melanie who said, well, I wasn't aware that I was a leader. I mean, I really shared this feeling of like, am I a leader? And then years come and said, well, that's okay. It's better to accept that and live with that in a good way, not saying no, not me, right? And use it in a good way. But I really connected with that in two ways. And the experience that I want to share, it's like the thing that I realized, and I think I really connect with what Camila said about listening with curiosity. It's because I think we need to really understand where we come from, what is our point of view, where our point of view comes from, understand who we are, understand what's our identity to be able to do anything about transforming the world. I mean, in other words, like using Gandhi, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. I mean, we cannot, and we all know like the others are, I think there is a famous philosopher, I don't know the sentence exactly in English, but it's like, hell are the others always. There is always something wrong with the others, not with ourselves, right? I mean, the others need to do differently. If the other were like this or that. So I think the experience has been a lot about, wow, we really need to make space also in our institutions, not only in our own personal lives, to self-knowledge, to work with like this, how do we become better listeners? How do we become better to try to understand what the other is saying? How do we promote that type of culture in our own organizations and also in the relationship with other organizations? Because what I feel like historically, when we have a common enemy, all of us, we can connect and fight against that enemy, right? But if the common enemy is not so evident, we start fighting among ourselves. I mean, about small things, because one does in a certain way, the other one does in a different way. And it's just like, it seems like we're always searching for conflict. So I think the leadership practice that I think it's most important, it's not most important. That's not the best word, but that it's like inspiring. It's this thing like we need to know who we are to become better human beings. And I think at the end of the day, that's our mission. And a last point about women, for me, I mean, I don't know different environment than an environment surrounded by women. So I really cannot say about how it would be like in a different environment, okay? Because I've always been so supported by other women in all the organizations I work for, in my own organization. And now I just left a meeting with like 30 women from different places in Rio de Janeiro, where I'm based in Brazil. Most of them like Black women from poor communities doing a work that I think I'm so amazed with what's happening, that filled my heart with hope. It's just like, wow, gosh, I think the world can become better, because I think there's so much power in what these women are doing, and they are doing so much. The level of solidarity in a situation in Brazil that we are living, that more than 20 million people are going hungry. it's amazing what's happening here. So today I'm quite emotive because the stories that I heard that, and I felt again, oh my God, another place where we have like this power of soul women. And then I'm come to that meeting with all these women from all over the world doing the wonderful things. And we all share vulnerabilities, we all share insecurities, and we all have like fantastic stories of like how much we can do individual and as collective by our leadership. And my next one is by video. Her name is Brenda.
Hello, everyone. I am Brenda Shinet Namugumia. I work at Fahinin Center for Development Innovation as a Food and Nutrition Security Advisor. I am happy to share with you my experience and practice of the leadership principle on lifting others up. For me, that principle is best summarized by a quote of a famous country song musician, Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton says that if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, then you're an excellent leader. That summarizes this leadership principle. And there are a few simple acts that I have experienced through this and also practiced. The first simple act is showing others what is possible and what can be possible. That is opening doors for others. This is in terms of negotiating opportunities, in terms of increasing visibility of available opportunities. These opportunities may be in terms of jobs, economic opportunities, education opportunities, networks where someone can benefit from these networks. Another way of lifting others up is through mentorship. I am very, very proud that I have mentored or engaged in mentoring a group of young people through the Uganda Nutrition Fellowship program, where the aim was to create leaders in nutrition within my country. And I always follow these young leaders to see what they are up to. I must say that I'm very proud of the work that they are doing and the fact that they are continuing to practice how to lift others up in their different jobs that they are doing. I have two more points to make. That lifting each other up is about also appreciating and giving credit where credit is due. And this involves stepping aside and let others shine. One of my former supervisors told me, if I did not step aside, people would never know that you are the one doing most of the work. So for that, there is need to give credit where it's due, because it's about giving others, letting others shine, be it in research or in work. Also, it's about the simple act of recognizing others, making them feel that they do exist, that they are known. Simple acts such as good morning to them, finding out how they are feeling at work, remembering their birthdays. These are things that make work and life interesting. And lastly, lifting each other up is about perseverance, waking up every morning and make a decision that you're going to lift someone else up. You're going to make them shine. That's how legacies are created. Thank you very much.
We're also going to share a clip from this morning session with Liz Gotu.
Good afternoon and evening, everyone. Thank you to the Collective Task Team for inviting me to talk about and share my experiences. My name is Liz Ogutu, and I'm the Africa Policy and Advocacy Officer for Harvest Plus, a program of the CGIAR that promotes biofortification or nutrient enrichment of staple crops. My work with nutrition started in 2005 when I first worked in fundraising for vulnerable women and children, and continued as I worked to fundraise for research on animal-sourced foods, food security, and food safety. I'm going to talk about the leadership practice of lifting others up. I have done this in many instances, especially now that I'm going towards the end of my career, But what I would like to share today is an occasion where I asked two ladies reporting to me to write a paper that would ultimately lead to more recognition of their brilliant activities in country policy implementation. This was about sending the elevator back down, as Jemima likes to point out from time to time. Jemima and I are good friends and we've worked together in many occasions. Unfortunately, however much I encouraged them, it did not take place. And I realized after leaving the organization that sometimes we need to get into that elevator to encourage people to get in and assure them that it is actually going up. I'm sure some of you have pressed the up button when the elevator comes along. You get in a hurry and find it is going down. So that's one of the challenges or failure on my part I have come across in lifting others up. The second challenge with this specific situation was that there was no allocation or KPIs within the organization that recognized the importance of this practice. So HR within organizations need to allocate time and provide incentives for women and men to lift others and for junior professionals to be allowed time for personal development. The third challenge we encounter is when peer competitiveness causes barriers in trying to elevate junior professionals, and those in leadership need to recognize and counteract this practice. I am dedicated to getting to that elevator so that I can assure others that it is going up. I'm also on the lookout for men allies who will actively encourage female leadership when these men reach the top. We know that men occupy more leadership positions, and I have personally benefited from men who have encouraged and pulled me up to leadership positions. I'm also happy to cede power and let others shine as we move towards a well-nourished world. Thank you. Good afternoon and evening, everyone.
Well, that was really wonderful to hear from all of you, and your stories really highlight how we can all be leaders by actively and intentionally practicing and modeling these behaviors. An important theme, I think, that came out from these discussions and these, what people shared so far is that how we can lead through all of our day-to-day, just our decisions that we make and our actions. These little things do matter and they add up. They provide consistency and inspiration. So thank you all for sharing. So now we have heard about how to lead. We're going to transition next to who should lead. I'm so excited that we will hear from Dr. Jemima Njuki, who recently began her new role as Director of Economic Empowerment at UN Women. Jemima has had an amazing and distinguished career as an advocate for gender equality. Before she joined UN Women, she was Director for Africa at the International Food Policy Research Institute, where one of her many achievements was leading the design and deployment of the Global Food 50/50, an indicator and mechanism for gender responsibility for organizations engaged in global food systems. This is a tape recording of the keynote that Jemima gave in the first session this morning, which she has given us permission to use again for this session.
It's been such a pleasure sitting here listening to all these wonderful testimonies and wonderful leadership attributes that people have been practicing, but to also be in such a warm, I call this a warm collective of women, where we really, even just from the conversations, from how we are engaging each other, that the role is to support each other, to build each other, to share knowledge, to share ideas of how we can continue to lead with honesty, to lead with integrity, to lead with empathy. So it's such a special group for me. Actually, every time I join the collective. I wanted to speak this morning and by actually telling the story of the last 2 years and what I've been doing the last 2 years and what that has taught me about women's leadership. So in 2019, the UN Secretary General called for a UN Food Systems Summit. And as he made the announcement that there would be a food systems summit in 2021, he appointed Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA and the former minister for agriculture in Rwanda, as the special envoy for that summit. And as Dr. Kalibata, and first she formed a small team of people, and as they were developing their architecture for the Food Systems Summit, they decided to have what they call the lever of change on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And because they recognized the centrality of gender equality and women's empowerment in food and nutrition security. And I got a call from Agnes, who asked me, would you like to lead that work? And I said, yes, I would like to lead that work. Now, two issues here. One, Liz talked about sending the elevator back. And sometimes we assume we are the only ones sending the elevator back for other people. And we always have to look up and see the people who are also sending the elevator back for us. And that is what Dr. Kalibata did for me. It might have been back and sideways and wherever. She was sitting in one part of Nairobi, I was sitting on another part. So at some point, if it was really a physical elevator, it would have had to navigate the traffic of Nairobi. But long story short, I ended up working alongside Dr. Kalibata to advance the gender equality and women's empowerment work for the UN Food Systems Summit. And what I then did is I got a group of women together, a group of gender specialists from around the world, activists who had been working on the ground, researchers, people from academia, to work with me in a team, because I realized as an individual, the ability to influence the UN Food Systems Summit, basically the ability to make that machinery even move an inch, was going to require a lot of women. And I needed a small group of women to help me even mobilize larger groups of women from around the world so that those voices could be heard at the highest level of that summit. And so we formed this group of women. There were some occasional men as allies, but we were very clear that the whole goal was to really mobilize the voices of women to be heard within the UN Food Systems Summit. Now, the result of this, I can tell you the intricacies of all that they would make for a whole novel. But as a result of this work, what we ended up with is, in my view, and I have been to many of these events, global events focused on food systems, focused on agriculture, where the reference to women was in terms of their vulnerabilities, where governments came and made statements and somehow they had everything well thought out, and at the end they would say, especially for women and girls, and especially vulnerable women and children. And that would be the whole reference to the issues of women. Basically, either they were grouped in terms of their vulnerability with children, or they were, part of the ending of a sentence. It's as though the sentence couldn't end unless they put especially women and girls, right? And so for the first time, we were in a summit where issues of gender equality with respect to food systems became central to the discussions, central to the conversations. We prioritized actions. We were there when the pre-summit happened in Rome, presenting the voices of women that we had heard from around the world. I was in the opening session representing women and their priorities. In the closing session saying, this is what we need done. This is the first time it had happened in a long time. women's voices were heard very loud and clear. Now, what did I learn from this experience that is relevant for what we've been talking today? I'll organize it around 2 key points, and because I realize we don't have a lot of time. One is the claiming leadership. Yeah. How do women claim their spaces? How do women claim their voices? How do women make sure that their voices are where they are needed, where decisions are being made, and especially those decisions that affect them or affect the world in the way the world interacts with them? And the second one is the creating of spaces for leadership, because those are two different issues, right? How women claim space, but also how those spaces can be created so that women do not have to fight for them. Yeah, it was Charlotte Chisholm, the first Black US Congresswoman, who once said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. So there is that. But then there is, why don't you actually create a table where women can also sit? So this is the difference between these two concepts. That if you don't create space for me at the table, I will bring a folding chair, but it's gonna be very tiring because I'll be sitting on a folding chair fighting while everybody else is in a plush sofa or whatever else they're sitting on, versus actually creating a table that makes space for women. And I think generally we know it's a well-known fact that the future is better with women at the table where decisions are being made. We have had trailblazing women who have been claiming their space, but even as they claim their space, making sure they are creating spaces for others. In the same way, Dr. Kalibata got appointed as a woman to lead the Food System Summit as an envoy and reached out to others. And in turn, those that she reached out to others, creating that space to make sure that you are a critical mass. I think that the period of glorifying because I am the first Black woman in a certain space, or I am the only woman in a certain space, are over. Yeah, that we need more women in all spaces. Now, how do we create these leadership spaces for women? We know that even with record-breaking entry by women, for example, into media, into Fortune 500 companies, we know we are not there yet. So I was reading some data from last year that only 7.4% of companies on the Fortune 500 list are run by women, because we know women are still facing multiple forms of discrimination that are keeping them from advancing. So our biggest question is, how can we make spaces, including those spaces that we are leading as women? Because we also cannot assume, because we are leading spaces as women, that those spaces are necessarily inclusive, although we do know that when we have women in leadership, even the topics being discussed change. Yeah, even the environment within which work is happening changes, but this is not always automatic. It takes the intentionality that you have all been talking about. So there is also some systemic changes that need to be done, and those need all of us. They need laws, they need policies. It is why we launched the Global Food 50-50. We need to call for parental leave policies that work for women, equal pay for work of equal value, zero tolerance to workplace sexual harassment and violence, sharing domestic work so that women can actually participate in economic work, demanding equal representation of women in boardrooms. When we did the Global Food 50-50, there's 13 indicators around leadership, around policies, and around the outcomes of food systems organizations, so that they can be accountable for some of these changes in practices, so that we can start seeing large scale change in the way food systems organizations work. So I'll just finish by summarizing in 2 key points: that we cannot underestimate the power of collectives such as this, where we actually come share experiences about how we can claim space for our leadership and actually celebrate the way we as women lead. But at the same time, our spaces remain very male dominated at the moment, and we will need a lot of male allies. I think it's Elizabeth who mentioned this. We will need a lot of male allies that believe in women's leadership, that can be part of the change, that can be part of this process of creating spaces that women can lead. I'll stop there, Corina, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, I had already listened to this talk earlier today, but it has the same impacts listening to it again. We certainly are grateful for Jemima for her words of wisdom and inspiration. So earlier we had mentioned in our call to action that we also made a commitment to keep ourselves accountable as individuals and as a collective. We now want to make our joint commitment together. So in the chat, we've dropped this commitment that we would like for us to read together as a collective. As a collective, I welcome everybody to unmute themselves to join me in reading this. Let's give a moment so folks can unmute themselves. Okay, let's start. As a collective, we commit to proactively adopting and strengthening leadership practices for ourselves, individuals, in our work environment, and within our broader food systems nutrition networks. We commit to lead from where we stand, and to share and support development and leadership practices and others to build momentum and collective impact. We commit to calling out structural challenges created by the economic, social, cultural, and political systems which work as we come up with them and to work collectively to break them down. In turn, we call on everyone who works in nutrition and food systems to integrate courageous leadership practices in the way you work. Please join us. Yep, that was a beautiful cacophony of voices, committed towards the same social purpose. And that was just really wonderful to hear. Rebecca, to you now.
As we come to the end, I want to echo that as we wrote this manifesto, we asked ourselves many questions in the process for leadership. We continue to grapple with many of these questions, and we are aware that we still have much to learn. We know we must move forward in the spirit of inquiry, listening, learning, and adapting as we go. In this spirit, we see this manifesto as a living document, which we will revisit as we learn. And we encourage all of you, when you read it and you have any feedback, to please share it with us. We want to thank all of you who attended this launch today. The link to the Manifesto for Leadership is available online, and we've been sharing that link in the chat as well. We encourage you to read it, think about it, and we hope it can serve as a resource as you go about your work and in your daily lives. Thank you all, and have a good evening, a good morning, and a good afternoon wherever you are. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.